Hi everyone, welcome to my first YouTube video. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Nivedananda Kumar and I have been active since 2009 in the Tamil political landscape. If you don't know me, that's alright, because we didn't do shit.
Should have burned this place down when I had a chance.
So let's start with today's subject with a question. What do you get if you combine the South African apartheid engineering with the genocidal wars of Tamil Eelam with the UN hypocrisy? That's right, you get the Buffel APC. In the 70s, South Africa faced two major problems. One was the bad PR related to its apartheid regime, and the second one were border wars. In the border wars, rebels in Angola and Namibia planted a lot of mines. To counter that, South Africa developed its Buffel APC. It was built on the chassis of a Mercedes-Benz Unimog.
Ich bin stolz auf euch.
And it had a V-shaped hull that deflected the blast waves of the explosion. In the 80s, Sri Lanka faced a major problem too. After 3 decades of non-violent struggle, the Tamils decided to pick up arms. Besides arms, they also mastered the art of IEDs that caused major casualties to the Sri Lankan armed forces. To counter that, they ordered the Buffel APC from South Africa. In 1985, they reached the battlefields of Tamil Eelam and were sent into an early retirement violently. The first Buffel was destroyed in 1985, where the Tigers decided to celebrate Thai Pongal with a big blast. Soon Sri Lanka realized that it needed more APCs, but the Buffel from South Africa was too expensive. For that, they developed their own version based on the Buffel that was named the Unicorn. The first Unicorn was introduced in 1987, but also in the same year a new enemy to the Tamils was introduced. It was the IPKF, the Indian Peacekeeping Force. For 3 years they decided to disarm the Tigers, but failed miserably. So they left in 1990. In the same year, the Second Ulm War started, where Sri Lankan troops and the Tigers faced off each other again. But this time, the Tigers were not only doing guerrilla actions, but they also started to act as a conventional army. And the conventional army needs armored vehicles, and for that they started to capture Buffels. And the first Buffel was captured in 1990, and in the 90s several more Buffels and Unicorns will be captured. As an example, here you see one got captured in the Battle of Mullaitivu in 1996. After more than a decade of fighting, Sri Lanka received a lot of feedback on the performance of their Buffel/Unicorn. And with this feedback, they created a new version, an updated version of the Unicorn. And that was introduced in the 2000s, and it was named the Unibuffel. The Unibuffel won't see any actions because a ceasefire agreement was reached in 2002. The fifth peace agreement between the Tigers and Sri Lanka lasted from 2002 till 2006. And in this time, Sri Lanka received a lot of backup and beefed up its forces, while the Tigers got weakened significantly. Soon the Tigers realized they won't stand a chance against the new Sri Lankan army, but they still decided to fight, because they had only 2 options left. One was capitulation, or the second one was annihilation. This last war, the 4th Ulm War, the Tigers fought a 33 months of a conventional war that took the form of an attritional war, similar one like the Ukrainian war. And in this war, the Tigers used all their arms and all their equipments which they had, also the Buffels. Their Buffels and Unicorns were even used in the last month of the war, Here is a footage from the 3rd May of 2009, 2 weeks before the war, where we ended with a genocidal massacre, where you can see the tigers driving on a buffel or a unicorn and trying to halt the Sri Lankan advancement. After the end of the war, there remained a lot of Sri Lankan troops and armored vehicles, despite a huge chunk of the army was used for militarization of the Tamil homeland. And what did Sri Lanka do with these troops? They sent them as UN peacekeepers into some countries, like African countries in South Sudan or Mali. And with them went also the latest Buffel version, the Unibuffel. The UN, still being busy to investigate the war crimes committed by the Sri Lankan armed forces, used the same troops as peacekeepers in several countries. While the Sri Lankan armed forces have a long history as UN peacekeepers, it's very problematic that these troops that are accused of committing grave war crimes are being used in other regions to prevent war crimes. And it's also a bad PR for the UN when you have an accused war criminal standing beside these latest versions of the Buffels that are painted in white and have a UN logo on them. Thank you very much for being patient and listening to this video. Please leave a like and write something in the comment section. And have a nice day.